Republican Congresswoman from the state of New York and House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee member Nicole Malliotakis. Welcome, Congresswoman. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and start with the markets, because these are skittish markets right now. We keep going back, forth, back, forth. They know that the Fed is on the track to, continue to raise rates to combat Biden's inflation mess that he's created. Omnibus bill, $1.7 trillion more of spending. My feeling, and I've been a student in that market for many years, is that this is going to be worse in 2023.
A lot of people are concerned about that. I think there is the uncertainty. Look, we did gain the House in the elections, Republicans, but we did not get the Senate. And now with a split Congress, I think there is a lot of concern about what direction the country will be going in. I know that the Republicans have a real commitment to the country that we're going to fight to secure the border, that we're going to try to push for American domestic energy production. We're going to try to address these supply chain issues. We're trying to be less reliant on China and adversaries for our needs. But will the Senate meet us there? Will they work with us? And the truth is that we do have an administration that is ignoring the problems, as you've just mentioned. The disaster at the southern border is completely unsustainable. That is the reality. It is costing taxpayers in our nation so much at the time where we are at $31 trillion debt. So we have to become a little more conservative with our spending. We need to be responsible. And that is why I voted against the $1.7 trillion omnibus, for that very reason, because it was spending too much money that was just unnecessary. It was kept funding programs that didn't show metrics of success and was giving more money overseas while ignoring the problems here at home.
People are frustrated, certainly, with a lot of that. Let me switch gears for a moment, because as this is all happening, you sort of set the stage nicely with the backdrop of everything. You see, if you read the New York Post or some other publications, you'll see pictures of President Biden, and he's leaving for his vacation. He's going to the Caribbean. He's staying at a donor's house. I mean, it looks beautiful. It looks gorgeous there. And I'm sure a lot of people would love to have a vacation like that. He's entitled to it. But having said that, we've got a lot of problems here. We just had a bomb cyclone that killed dozens of people in Buffalo. We've got people stranded, can't get home for almost a week because of the debacle at Southwest. And the president is off in the islands with his family to celebrate New Year's.
Yeah, look, as you mentioned, politicians are also entitled to have a vacation, have holiday with family, but it just shows how out of touch they are to be doing this at this current moment, to be flying on your private jet while you're seeing, so many thousands of Americans stranded at airports, unable to get home. I am concerned about what's happening with Southwest, particularly after the taxpayers gave them billions of dollars in a bailout. And instead of, reinstating dividend at this moment, maybe they should be investing in their technology. That seemed to be more of a priority if they want to actually save their business in the long run. So I think that Secretary Buttigieg has not done enough, quite frankly. Over the summer, there were also cancellations.
Exactly.
There were some last year. And when he had these big meetings with the airlines over the summer, he assured the United States of America that this would not happen in the holidays, that they would be better prepared, that he was holding their feet to the fire and holding them accountable and pushing for real changes. And sure enough, months later, we see exact opposite happening. So, I think this is certainly something that the Transportation Committee, of which I'm a member, should be looking at, particularly in the new majority. But when you have billions of dollars going in taxpayer funds, going to a private entity, and then you see that they still furlough employees, that they're not making the necessary improvements to keep their business sustainable and profitable, that is a problem, I think, for the taxpayers in particular, but for their customers as well.
I think so, too. And you make the point that this is not the first time this has happened. And that's what just kills me about this story, that there was time to prepare for this, try to fix it. It's not something that's going to be fixed overnight to, update the whole entire technology system. Switching gears, but sort of tying this all together with the economy as well. There was a story in the Washington Post, and obviously, people, the loss of life in Buffalo, the damage that we've suffered economically is really important. But this story talked about how people are making hard choices. For example, giving up their pets and taking them to shelters. They're starting to see a rise in animals that are arriving because people can't afford to keep their pets. I mean, some of these things are really very sad. And the BLS will spit out a number and say, well, inflation's down to 7.1% from 7.7. And everybody will applaud and say, oh, that's, great. But it's still really pinching people.
It absolutely is. And I think the Democrats in Washington there seems to be a disconnect. They don't seem to understand that the policies that they've put in place are really hurting people. When we are not producing energy here domestically, it's hurting us. It's hurting our businesses who have to manufacture goods. It's hurting the transportation system that needs to transfer it. It's going to cost more money to transport food. It's going to hurt people at the stores. The end user gets hit with this. And so I think the energy policy, honestly, is probably the biggest issue right now that we need to fight to make sure that we're not relying on adversaries. Look what Europe is, what's happening there. They're relying on Russia, and now energy is being weaponized against them.
Yeah.
We cannot allow that to happen here, yet we're following in those same footsteps, doing the same thing. You see them closing nuclear power plants, not extending permits for gas-fired plants, knowing that it's just going to continue to skyrocket the cost of energy, leading to people to pay more for food and home heating costs.
A couple of points there on oil and gas, right? We're going to see prices go up because China's coming out of its lockdown period, and that was one of the reasons the net price of oil started to come down. And also, I mentioned this yesterday, I got a text from Con Ed on the coldest day of the year. It felt like -8 degrees between Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and they said, well, we have a natural gas shortage. If you could avoid using heat, please do so. I mean, you sit back and say, do we live in a third world country?
Yeah, well, I got that very same text message, and I was thinking the same thing, and I had predicted this was going to happen. We wrote to the administration warning them and asking them to come forward with a plan on how we can avoid a shortage of natural gas, of fuel oils, particularly here in the Northeast. Had there been a rail strike, it would have been much, much worse. Thankfully, that was averted because of action by Congress, by the way. And what I'll say is I go back to we need to have traditional energy sources. I'm for clean energy. I'm for diversification, but we need to have an all-of-the-above strategy here. We can't just decide to shut down traditional, even clean, right? Nuclear and natural gas is much cleaner than coal. They want to shut those industries down, too.
We do it the cleanest in the country.
They want to shut it down.
I mean, in the world, rather.
But then when you need more, they want to go to dirtier oil in Venezuela, for example, and appease dictators that are oppressing their people to the point that they're coming over our border illegally just to escape. That's who the president rather purchase oil from than American workers here in the United States, where we can ramp up production. Yeah. That, I think, is one of the biggest fights we're going to have as a House Republican conference this year.
And the green jobs he promised never materialized. Meantime, people are losing their jobs in that sector, which is a horrible thing. I want to switch gears just while I have you. Final question on the border. Title 42, according to the Supreme Court, is going to stay in place. They're going to hear about it and decide next year. The president very nonchalant about it.
Yeah. I mean, the president went to court and fought for the last 2 years to get rid of Title 42. And that has maybe allowed for 2.5 million less individuals to cross our border illegally. But the fact is, 5 million people have crossed our border illegally. They've also caught people on the terrorist watch list, over 100 people on that list. They also caught tens of thousands of criminals who were previously deported or convicted of crimes in other countries and trying to come into our borders. What about the million that were the gotaways? We don't know who they are and what their purpose is. And there's about 70% of the people that are saying they qualify for asylum don't qualify for asylum. And that is the problem. This is a big business for the drug cartels. They're the only ones that are benefiting from this. It's not humane for anybody, not for the migrants, not for our law enforcement and Customs and Border Protection agents who are committing suicide because of what they're seeing at the southern border and knowing that it's preventable. And then the fentanyl that is streaming over,
hundreds of millions of dollars, killing
100,000 Americans last year. We don't know the numbers yet for this year, but I'm sure they're going to be higher. Yeah. And the president of the United States is allowing this to happen. It is a complete abdication of his responsibility. Mayorkas should resign, and we need to pass our Border Protection Act for America. It does exactly what the CBP is telling us they need us to do to secure our border and stop this. But I'll tell you, as a New Yorker, someone who lived through September 11th, saw the sacrifice of our city and the men and women that are still dying to this day because of that terrorist attack. That's what scares me most, is we don't know who is necessarily coming in. And the million gotaways, the president has a responsibility to keep our nation safe, and right now he's not doing that.
Congresswoman, we appreciate you being in Washington, fighting the fight for this state, and also representing, the rest of the country. A lot of views very similar to what you just described here. So we appreciate your time tonight, and it's always good to see you.
Yeah, great to be here in person. Thank you.
Happy New Year.